Hi. So, this video was supposed to be out in November. I'm a little salty because Daniel Mullins announced his new game, right after when I was planning on uploading this video. It would have been perfect timing. But oh well. Basically what happened is that I really love Inscryption. It's tied with Edith Finch as my favorite game of all time, and I really just wanted to talk about it, but I didn't have anything to say that no one else hasn't said already. And then I was like, hey, I've never made an iceberg before. That would be cool. That would be a fun thing to try. And then literally everything that could go wrong did go wrong. I played the game on Switch, but I was having a hard time getting footage off of the Switch, so I got it on my computer, which made sense because almost all the ARG stuff is PC only, but then my computer was too old to handle it, so the gameplay looked like this. Completely unplayable, so I got it on my PlayStation, which ended up being a blessing in disguise as there was a lot of PlayStation-only content. But then I got some pretty nasty glitches, so that sucked. I used my cousin's computer to get as much as the PC ARG stuff as I could, but that ended up being cursed because half the buttons on our keyboard didn't work, so we had to sit there and reroute as many as we could. But then I was about to wrap up the video when my old-ass computer decided it didn't want to run Premiere Pro anymore. Every time I tried to open the video to edit it, my whole computer would crash. So I cried for about 2 days, but I took some savings, and now I have a really good computer that I got in after Christmas sale. The bank thought I was committing fraud when I got it, so that sucked, but I have it now. It's all good. And it's a good computer that could actually run Inscryption. So I downloaded it again and decided to run through to get all the ARG footage that I couldn't get before on my own, but then I got another glitch where I can't walk towards Leslie's cabin. The point I'm trying to make here is that making this video has been absolute hell, but here we are. We finally made it. Spoilers for the whole game, by the way. After this point, I am holding nothing back. So, in case you don't know, Inscryption is a roguelike deck builder game created by Daniel Mullins that was released in October of 2021. I've never really been into card games, but I love this one. I could just sit down and play this game for hours. The vibes are immaculate, the music is great, the characters are interesting, the meta-narrative is fantastic. I love how this game is clearly based on creepypastas while at the same time being a subversion of them. Luke gets this pack of cards at a garage sale that leads him to this messed up game where the original owner died and her ghost is in the game. Very Ben drowned of them. Or Casey burned in this case.
No one was killed at the facility, though tragically young video game developer Casey Hobbs died from fire-related complications.
But there actually isn't anything supernatural going on at all. The ghost of Casey is just an NPC that Casey named after herself before her death. And all the creepy stuff is due to a code in the floppy disk that corrupted the whole game and gave the character sentience. It's basically Doki Doki Literature Club with something sketchy, making the character self-aware, and one of them destroys the other main characters and takes over the game. Just Leshy, am I right? I love how the power struggle and the investigation into it comes with the switching of mediums. I remember I was playing with my cousins the first time and one of them left the house during Act 1 and came back during Act 2, and she straight up thought that we switched games. She did not believe me when I told her we were still playing Inscryption. And who can blame her? These don't look like the same game at all. I know people generally don't like Acts 2 and 3 and see Act 1 as the highlight of the game and wish it was the whole game. And I get that, I do. I also love Act 1. But honestly, the whole thing is just weaved together so well. There is just so much in Act 1 that suddenly has extra context when you switch to Act 2. Like how in Act 1, Leshy has you make death cards after you die, and then when you get to Act 2, it turns out that that was his gimmick in the original boss fight, and that the death cards he made were called amalgams, which he later implemented in as a rare card after he took over. So he just took all these things that were programmed into him and expanded on them in a new way, and it feels perfectly natural. And even Act 3, which I admit I don't like as much as the other two, is a lot of fun too. PO3 is just an extremely funny character. He's just so salty all the time, it's hilarious, and his bosses are really fun and interesting. Some of the craziest stuff in the game happens during the Act 3 boss fights. And the finale always gets me. Like, after hours of battling Leshy and the other scribes, him saying that we don't need to keep score always makes me tear up. I wish this was the final note that the game ended on before it was deleted. I mean, I like Magnificus's musings in front of the pink moon as much as the next guy, but the game started with Leshy and should have ended with Leshy. Just my opinion, I guess. I obviously have a few criticisms here and there, but nonetheless, I deeply admire how much work and care went into this game, and it seems like I'm not the only one. If you beat the final boss in Casey's mod and you unlock the secret entry 11, you find what is pretty much a love letter to the fans, talking about how wonderful the reception to the game has been, and then says, "It makes me feel like all my work mattered, and then some. I am overflowing with gratitude." It's just so wholesome and nice. For as spooky and dark as this game is, there's a lot of love and appreciation surrounding it. Inscryption is a game filled to the brim with secrets and Easter eggs, and the fan base almost immediately dedicated themselves to finding every single one. I love how Luke as a character is supposed to mirror the real-life players experiencing this game, combing through looking for hints and clues to the greater mystery. And we even pick up where he left off, using what he found in order to further our search. In that way, the players are Luke's equals. We're all working together with him to solve the game. And I do want to make it clear that anything to do with the ARG was discovered through the hard work of other people. I'm not taking credit for any of these discoveries. I'm just reporting on them. If anything I talk about in that regard sounds interesting, I'm going to link the Google Docs that go over the ARGs in my description, and I implore you to please check them out. So, the way I chose to arrange this iceberg is that the first level is only stuff that a casual player running through completely blind would know, and then the farther down you go, the more obscure and involved it gets, usually having to explore a little farther or go outside the game to get information. So, with that, let's begin. Daniel Mullins Games. Daniel Mullins is the creator of Inscryption. He has made 2 previous games, called Pony Island and The Hex, which both take place in the same universe as Inscryption. All 3 of the games are actual games within the Daniel Mullins universe, with layers upon layers of meta buried within them. Pony Island is pretty well known. It was highly celebrated when it came out, but The Hex, for some reason, completely flew under the radar. I didn't even know it existed until a few months ago. Which is too bad, because it's a really, really good game. I want to talk about it in the future, I just feel like I need more time with it. I don't know. I'm glad I played it before replaying Inscryption though, because there are a lot of references to the Hex in Inscryption. I'll be pointing some of them out as I go. Luke Carter. Luke Carter is the protagonist of Inscryption and the person we play as in the main game. Played by Kevin Saxby, he is a YouTuber who makes card opening videos and, for one of his videos, buys a vintage pack of Inscryption cards at a yard sale. Opening them up, he finds some coordinates that lead him to the middle of the woods, where he unearths an old floppy disk containing a video game version of the Inscryption card game. We play as Luke as he explores the game, and even hear him talking a few times.
Oh my, I think I just beat him! Oh.
His voice is the first thing we actually hear when booting up the game.
Okay, time to figure out what's on this thing.
Unfortunately, Luke makes the mistake of contacting Game Funa, who made the Inscryption cards, to ask about the game, which leads to a representative from Game Funa showing up to his door to intimidate him into giving it back. By this point, though, Luke has become obsessed with uncovering the secrets of Inscryption, which he does eventually succeed at. We don't get to see them for ourselves, but whatever it is, it clearly drives him insane. He attempts to expose the company for their horrible misdeeds, but is cut short by the Game Funa employee shooting him in the head. Casey Hobbs. Casey Hobbs was an employee of Game Funa and the main developer of Inscryption. Her proper introduction occurs maybe about 3/4 of the way through the game, when Luke is trying to track down the original owner of the cards he bought and talks to Casey's mother, finding out that she died in a fire at the Game Funa factory a number of years ago. However, her presence in the game was felt even as early as Act 1, as one of the death cards is named after her, as well as an NPC in Act 2 and some bounty hunters in Act 3. Casey's tragic backstory is revealed through Casey's mod, and also somewhat through the ARG. She was completely unaware of any of the horrible secrets the game was being used to cover up, until her copy of the game came to life and Leshy took over. Casey was actually extremely charmed with Leshy and his version of the game. She got really attached to him, and due to her extreme loneliness, even came to see him as a friend. That's me. Casey is me. While she's horrified by the terrible secrets she uncovered on the disc, she just couldn't bear to kill Leshy. She busied herself with modding Leshy's version of the game to make it more balanced and create more challenges, until her boss, Kaminsky, demanded that everyone return their discs. Casey, knowing of the terrible secrets hidden on the disc, but unwilling to kill Leshy, decides instead to hide it. She buries it in the woods, leaving the coordinates on a pack of inscription cards in case she ever needed to get it back. Unfortunately, though, she died shortly after, with Luke finding the disc years later, and Leshy waiting right where Casey left him all those years ago. Game Funa. Game Funa is the fictional company that created the Inscryption card game and then later on the Inscryption video game. It first appeared in the Hex, being the company that Lionel Snill sold his games to. They don't seem to be very good at making games, honestly, and don't seem to have the best reputation, and they are also involved in something sketchy, since it's revealed that they've hidden some pretty nasty data on the Inscryption disc and go as far as murdering Luke in order to get it back. Talking cards are the scribes. So throughout Act 1, you find a lot of cards that are able to talk to you. First is the Stoat, which is used in the tutorial and immediately starts trying to convince you that the shadowy figure you're playing against is crazy and bad and needs to be defeated, and then leads you to the safe, where you find the Stink Bug. She is, much more polite and helpful than the Stoat, I guess you could say. As you go through Act 1, the Stoat and Stink Bug start to physically change. The Stoat turns into a rectangle, and the Stink Bug starts to look more and more like an old lady. Eventually, you find the Stunted Wolf, who doesn't really have much of a personality, honestly. Still more polite than the Stoat, though, and he helps you finally defeat the shadowy figure, which triggers Act 2, and the reveal that there is a whole other game that these characters originally came from. There are 4 scribes, and it becomes pretty obvious through dialogue and the characters' general appearances that they are the talking cards. PO3, the Scribe of Technology, was the Stoat. Grimora, the Scribe of the Dead, was the Stink Bug. Magnificus, the Scribe of Magic, was the Stunted Wolf. And the 4th one, Leshy, the Scribe of Beasts, was the shadowy figure we were playing against, who staged a takeover and captured the other scribes. We also see minor bosses get turned into talking cards later on in Act 3 after PO3 takes over, with PO3 hiding them away like Leshy did to the scribes, so I guess this turning an enemy into a card thing is just the most efficient way to get rid of someone. Tentacle cards. The tentacle cards are 3 cards with, well, tentacles on them, that each contain a unique method of gaining attack. Introduced in Act 1, Leshy seems confused about where these cards came from, and their sigils are covered up in the handbook, so you just kinda have to figure out how they work for yourself. Or be like me and just Google it, because I'm a cheater. The Bell Tentacle's attack comes from how close it's placed to the bell. If it's in the closest lane, it has 4 attack. If it's in the farthest lane, it has 1 attack. The Hand Tentacle's attack is based on how many cards you have in your hand. So if you're holding 10 cards, then congratulations, your card has 10 attack. Although that comes with the fact that sometimes you just don't have any cards in your hand and then it doesn't do anything. And finally, the Mirror Tentacle mirrors its opponent's attack. They're all pretty weird. The Mirror Tentacle honestly kind of sucks. Like, it'll be good in one instance and then suddenly becomes useless after it kills the card in front of it. Big fan of the bell tentacle though, and it's got some secrets we're going to be talking about farther down the iceberg that make it even better. Winning cards. In the first act, whenever you lose to Leshy, you get dragged into this weird back room here and make a death card that you could choose to use next time. However, if you beat Leshy without the film roll, your death card is actually hung up on the door. Leshy is such a creep. He phrases it in the darkest way possible, like, "I nailed the previous victor to the door," and then you turn around and it looks like he hung them on the fridge because he's proud of you. The Trapper is the traitor. The Trapper and the Traitor are two characters that you meet while traveling through Leshy's map during Act 1. The Trapper sells you pelts, and the Traitor trades new cards for them. They're both friendly, albeit a bit strange. Then you get to the end of the snow line, and oh my god, the Trapper was evil the whole time! Which is kind of a betrayal. But then the real twist comes through in the second part of the fight, when the Trapper suddenly turns his mask upside down, and oh my god, he's also the traitor. This is an insane twist. It's nothing compared to the twists that come later in the game, obviously. But on a first playthrough, it's kind of mind-blowing to see him flip that mask around. Like, I literally never noticed it's the same mask. That's nuts. There's an implication in the later two acts that the traitor is the dominant or true personality. I'm not really sure how this works, honestly. But I like how in Act 2, the traitor just turns her entire head around to turn into the Trapper. I'm gonna be honest though, I don't really get their plot here. Like, they're obviously pulling some kind of a scam, right? He's selling you pelts and then you give them right back to him. And then you buy them from him again. So he's just selling you the same pelts over and over again, right? But then if you go to the trader with no pelts or even infested pelts, more on that later, she gives you money to buy pelts. I don't entirely get it. I like it though. I admire the hustle even if I don't get the hustle. Casey's Mod. Casey's Mod is a free add-on that is automatically unlocked once you beat Inscryption, and can be accessed through the main menu. It's basically a forever version of the first act of the game, where you battle Leshy, over and over again, unlocking new cards and added challenges that will allow you to access lore bits the farther in you go. It's actually kind of a prequel to the main game, since you're playing as lead developer Casey as she discovers that the game is corrupted and has to grapple with what to do about it. It exists as a bonus to the people who were extremely charmed with Leshy and the entire first act as a whole, and, as previously mentioned, serves as a love letter to the fanbase. I like it a lot. I think it's a lot of fun. Ouroboros. Ouroboros is my favorite card in the whole game. I love this little guy. He's a rare card in Act 1, but is present through the entire game. He has the unkillable sigil, much like the cockroach. However, Ouroboros is special in that every time he dies and returns to your hand, his health and attack go up. So if you sit there and farm him for long enough, you can easily have a card with like 100 attack. And it keeps it through the whole game too. You could get a lot of money really quickly with this card. I love him. He's perfect. Jonah Senzel. Jonah Senzel is the composer for Inscryption. He made not only all the music, but also every single sound effect in the game. And in 2022 was awarded the IGF Award for Excellence in Audio. He also worked on Daniel Mullins' other two games, as well as his new project Panda Circus that was just announced. All the music in this video was composed by Senzel, and I'm also going to link his website down below. Please check out his stuff, he's very talented. Greater Smoke. So in Act 1, the amount of times you can lose are shown from these candles. If you can make it to the bosses without losing, you'll receive a smoke card unless you blows out your extra candle. This is pretty much just a free sacrifice, and it gives you bones. However, there's a puzzle in the cabin where if you keep putting these candles out, Leshy will eventually upgrade the smoke card to the Greater Smoke, which gives it 1 attack-free health. PO3 knows that Casey died. In Act 3, one of the NPCs you encounter is based off of Casey Hobbs. The NPC says that she'll need some heat to get rid of some ice. Heat is written in red, and then PO3 pops up on screen to laugh. Considering the real Casey apparently died in a fire, yeah, it seems like PO3 not only knows about her death, but is laughing at it. Skullstorm. Skullstorm is the name of the achievement that you get if you beat every single challenge in Casey's mod at once. The fanbase has pretty much adopted it as the name of the actual challenge itself. It's very difficult, and it has probably taken several years off my life. I did not beat it again for this video. I did kinda try, but I already had 10 mental breakdowns trying to record all this footage as it is. But here's an old screenshot from my Switch that proves that I have done it. I just don't have footage of it, unfortunately. L. Elle is Luke Carter's deceased sister. You find files about her scattered around Bottopia after the Archivist fight. We don't really know anything about her, except that she and Luke used to play card games together. If you're playing the game on console, you'll find photos of her on Luke's hard drive during the Archivist fight, as well as access her hard drive, although we don't learn anything new about her since there isn't actually anything on it. Unlike the other confirmed deceased characters in the game, she doesn't seem to have anything to do with the ARG or even the larger story, since she died long before Luke found the disc and has no link to Game Fuda or the Carnalpha code, at least that we know of right now. I guess that she's just here to give Luke a tragic backstory, which, fair enough. That could definitely serve a purpose in Luke's journey. Maybe Elle's role in the story is to show that Luke is in a vulnerable state. Because in Casey's mod, it showed that Casey became obsessed with Inscryption due to her extreme loneliness. Maybe Luke is feeling the same after the loss of one of the closest people in his life. That the grief and isolation are driving him deeper and deeper into this mystery and ultimately leads him to his death. Which, I don't know, maybe that's a stretch, but hey, that's my personal interpretation. Starvation. Starvation is what happens when you run out of cards. Leslie starts putting the starvation cards down one slot at a time, each with their attack 1 point higher, and it has the repulsive sigil, which means that you can't attack it. So it's pretty much a death sentence if all the slots are filled up. Although YouTuber Exo did figure out a strategy where you could use the starvation to defeat the Grizzlies during Skullstorm.
Now we're gonna do 4 damage, we're gonna block all the hits, and then I'm gonna summon Cuckoo to do the final damage.
So yeah, check out that video, it's pretty cool. The only other thing worth mentioning about starvation is that it's a reference to the starving man from Sacrifices Must Be Made, which we're gonna talk about a little bit farther down. Ejirak. A rare card exclusive to Casey's mod, it's a shapeshifter and will take the form of other cards. You can usually tell which one is him when you're picking out the rares because the name will have a question mark after it. And it has red eyes. But while in battle, it's basically impossible to tell which one is Ejirak and which isn't until you put a card on the board and it transforms into him. He's a pretty cool card. He's got 4 attack and he's got the repulsive sigil so nothing can actually attack him. I'm not super fond of him though because he can mess up the fair hand mechanic. Also, he's impossible to get rid of. He hides during the campfires and the sacrifices to the Bone Lord. But I've definitely gotten some use out of him, and hey, the game lets you get the painting puzzle even if you accidentally put down Ejirak, which is nice. Speaking of which, painting puzzle. In Act 1, Leshy has a painting on his wall that sometimes has cards on it. If you line up the cards on your board in the same way, you'll unlock this little clover. The clover lets you reshuffle the cards whenever Leshy is giving you new ones if you don't like the ones he's offering. Doing this puzzle a second time will give you a third candlestick, and doing it a third time replaces the squirrels with bees. They function just like the squirrels except they actually have attack, so they're a pretty decent upgrade. The painting puzzle also returns in Casey's mod, and it gives you some pretty strong items, so make sure that you do it. It is totally worth it. Stitched pelts. You can actually stitch together 2 pelts at the mycologist, and if you do and then go to trade them in, you can get these stitched together cards, which isn't a bad deal at all. This also applies to all the pelts in your stack, not just the stitched ones, which is nice. Touch of Death on the Moon. In the main game when you're fighting the moon, it's possible to just one-shot it by using something with the Touch of Death sigil, which is kinda hilarious. Like this big huge card with 40 health and you can just kill it in one hit. This was changed in Casey's mod. A sigil was added to the moon to keep it from getting poisoned. There were also some other changes to some mechanics in Casey's mod, and one of the most famous ones is Fecundity nerfed. In the main game of Inscryption, Fecundity is one of the most powerful sigils. When you play a card with Fecundity, the card replicates in your hand, allowing you to play it again, and it just keeps replicating over and over. In Act 2, the mycologist can combine 2 field mice into the card Spore Mice, which has 2 Fecundity sigils and so makes 2 copies. And look how many copies you get! The most popular combo in Act 1 with Fecundity is to put it on the Gek. Since Gek has no cost, you can just play it over and over and over again. It's amazing. And apparently Daniel Mullins either didn't realize how overpowered the sigil is, or he just decided to straight up troll his fan base, because it was completely nerfed in Casey's mod. In universe, Casey was the one who realized that it was too powerful and decided to fix the sigil to make it less powerful, changing it so that a card with a Fecundity sigil only duplicates once. Like once total. The copies don't have the sigil anymore, so they don't do anything. Leshy is super offended by this, and honestly, the fans weren't super happy either. It's still a useful sigil, but it's not nearly as fun and crazy powerful as it used to be. Ring and Clock. So before you go to fight Leshy, you go through these cave trials where you have certain cards or items in order to pass and get certain advantages in the fight. One of these trials requires you to have a ring, which was kind of confusing to me the first time because I did not have a ring. However, if you look on the table, you'll see that it says 11 o'clock. So if you go to the clock and put in 11 o'clock, you get a ring. You actually keep the ring the entire game, which is pretty cool. It also works on the ringworm too if you happen to have that card. And speaking of the ringworm, poisoning the survivors. One of the ways to buff up your cards in Act 1 is at the campfire. You can choose one of your cards to get more attack or health by the fire, and the longer they stay there, the more powerful they become. However, there are survivors around the fire who are literally starving to death, and if you leave your card there too long, they will eat your card. So it's always a gamble how long you should keep them there. However, if you put in a ringworm and the survivors eat it, then they're poisoned and will not be at the campfire the next time you go to it, allowing you to buff up your cards as long as you want. This works too with anything with the Touch of Death sigil. Rabbits and squirrels orbit the moon. The moon card during Leshy's boss fight in Act 1 has some interesting sigils. One of them is Tidal Orbit, which pulls in small creatures like rabbits and squirrels. What's funny is that when a creature is taken, you can actually see them orbiting the moon. And if you put down dozens and dozens and dozens of squirrels and rabbits, it literally creates a ring around the moon. Trader Act 3. We talked about the trader already, but she was introduced in Act 1 as someone who'd trade you cards in exchange for pelts you'd buy from the trapper. She appears in Act 2 as well, as more of a shopkeeper kind of role. She still gives you cards, but you have to buy them off her with foils you receive from overkill damage. However, in Act 3, she's hidden away in a side room that you are able to unlock at the very end. Throughout Act 3, there are 5 hollow pelts for you to find, and giving them to the trader once unlocked has her present you with 5 pieces of information through tarot cards. They're very vague and mysterious, but they do paint pictures of the horrible tragedy surrounding the creation of Inscryption. Breaking Unfinished Uberbot Fight. There's this one Uberbot fight in Act 3 where PO3 got all lazy and decided that he didn't want to do anything, so he makes you design the fight. And you can totally break it, using the rules to create an unending loop of cards being destroyed and replaced over and over again. Whenever this happens, PO3 literally just jumps in and ends it and forces you to make a new rule. Drowned Soul. In Act 2, if you click on the well again after getting the epitaph piece, you will find the Drowned Soul card. It has Touch of Death and Waterborne, and I like it a lot. I kind of wonder if it's a reference to Ben Drowned, since Casey was clearly somewhat inspired by that, and this is Casey's well, but that's just speculation, I don't actually know. Hex Record. Unlocking the Safe in Casey's mod with the new combination gives you this record, which has the logo from the Hex on it and plays music from the Hex. Too fast, too soon. So if you do too well during the tutorial of Act 1, Leshy will send 8 grizzlies after you. Yes, like the meme. This usually happens in the second half of the boss battles, but it does happen during regular battles too. This is obviously unfair, but it isn't impossible. Like, I remember a bunch of people online complaining about the game being terrible because it forces you to lose, but this is completely beatable. If you get an opening in and beat them with everything you got, odds are you'll be okay. The Wall of Grizzlies was later repurposed into a challenge in Casey's mod, which I guess implies Casey might have made this as an extra challenge to herself, unless she was just like, yeah, okay, I'm just gonna keep this one change. Casey's skull. There's this skull in Leshy's cabin. You can mine it for teeth, and he uses it in boss battles because he's super extra. And it's actually revealed in Casey's mod that this is Casey's skull. Not the actual Casey who made Inscryption, but like the little ghosty that she named after herself who resides in Grimora's area in Act 2. I personally don't see it. Like, the little Casey ghost had an icicle sticking out of her head, and this skull doesn't. But the idea that the skull comes from Grimora makes perfect sense, and one of Grimora's other ghosts are able to possess it, so hey. Oh yeah, speaking of which, Royal Dominguez. Royal was one of the little NPC ghosts in Grimora's area of Act 2 that you have to fight. His backstory was that he was a pirate who died of scurvy in the 1600s. And talking to him after fighting Grimora reveals that his secret desire is to someday be a final boss. At the very end of the game, when you're playing with Grimora, she excitedly exclaims that it's time for a boss fight and dons a pirate mask, with cannons popping out and pirate music blasting, before everything is suddenly deleted. This is kind of a gut punch. Like, I really wanted to see what a Grimora boss fight would be like. However, we did eventually get that chance. Casey's mod had an update where you can now choose to battle a new final boss. Instead of Leshy and the Moon, Royal just crashes his way in and announces that he's gonna be the boss now. And Leshy's just kinda like, yeah, I'm okay with this. Please don't break the table. I don't know exactly what this means for the lore. Like, this is very explicitly not Leshy in a mask like all the other bosses. And did Casey add him in since he's the one canonically adding all these extra challenges? I don't know, but I also don't really care. He's a genuinely fun boss. Like, his fight isn't super hard, but it's so high energy, especially when the Lehman Shallow shows up and all the dancing skeletons keep abandoning him and he falls into despair. Plus, it's really nice of Daniel Mullins to finally give us the chance to fight this dude after cruelly ripping it away earlier. Cuckoo Raven Egg. The Cuckoo is a card exclusive to Casey's mod that is based off the Cuckoo bird that famously throws other birds' eggs out of the nest and replaces it with theirs. In the game, the Cuckoo will spawn a broken egg in the place right in front of it and then fly over to attack. This essentially shuts down an entire lane and can be used to prevent particularly strong enemies from being able to come down. However, there is a 10% chance that the egg will survive and hatch into a raven after one turn, which sucks. And honestly, it makes me not want to use the Cuckoo. Granted, if you power up the Cuckoo, it's not so bad. But still, it can be a devastating blow in certain circumstances, and I usually don't like to take that chance. Sacrifices Must Be Made. Sacrifices Must Be Made is the original version of Inscryption that Daniel Mullins created for a game jam in 2018, which means that he made the entire game in 48 hours. It's actually still available to play on itch.io, and it's basically a much shorter and rougher version of Act 1, where you're playing against a shadowy, mysterious stranger in a dark cabin who gets more and more angry and intimidating as the game goes on. It's revealed that you're playing as a father who crashed in the woods with your child and are playing the mysterious stranger in order to get food. However, you didn't tell the stranger about the child, and he is very offended by that. The game ends with the stranger congratulating you on earning your food, and then asks whether you or the child is going to be the meal. So yeah, it's pretty dark. And I guess this is why Leshy offers you meat when you beat him in Act 1. A lot of the cards here appear in Inscryption, obviously with more cleaned up art, though some of them look pretty damn exact. The Hunter card is one of the few cards that don't come back, but the appearance of it carried over into the Death cards. And then things like the scale, the bell, and some of the sigils are also introduced here. It's pretty cool. I'm not sure if it's canon to actual Inscryption or not, like if this is meant to be Leshy's canon backstory, or if it's completely separate. But it was included as part of the ARG, which we'll talk about later. The Karnoffel Code. The Karnoffel Code is something that Luke tries to mention in one of his videos before being censored.
And, oh yeah, what the fuck is the
Although some binary pops up when he tries to speak, and it's possible to translate it and see what he's talking about. And it's alluded to by several characters. Its origin is uncovered through the ARG and also certain events that you can unlock in the game. So the story goes that the Karnoffel Code was discovered by the Soviets after they came into possession of Adolf Hitler's corpse and found it written on a pack of Karnoffel cards that was in his pocket. Karnoffel being a real German card game and the oldest card game in all of Europe. And yes, seriously, this game has Hitler in its lore. In Act 3, with the traitor, when she shows us the devil card, she says that he created the code. Which, I mean, the devil is a canon character in the Daniel Mullins universe. More on that later. But look at the picture of the devil here. He's got one arm in the air, and there's some cards in his pocket. And then if you encounter the Bone Lord in Act 2, you walk up the skeletal remains of someone wearing trying to avoid YouTube, sorry, but like a World War II German uniform, and it has cards in the pocket. Lou Natus, the CEO of Game Funa, became aware of this code and sent a spy to get it. The code was then smuggled into the US on a floppy disk, which eventually came into the possession of Kaminsky, and then Game Funa employee Casey Hobbs, who was brought on to make a video game version of the card game Inscryption, which just seemed to be a front to have the Karnoffel Code hidden on the disk. The Karnoffel Code is responsible for creating the old data, which corrupted the game and brought its characters to life. Amanda. Amanda is the name of the woman who apparently works for Game Funa and comes to harass Luke in order to get the disc back, and then eventually kills him. Her name is covered up in the game, and in fact, she's just credited as redacted, but some binary pops up on the screen when her name is censored, and if you decode it, it says Amanda. Fair Hand Mechanic. The Fair Hand Mechanic is a mechanic programmed into the game that allows the player's hand to always start off playable. Whenever you start a round with Leshy, you will be given 4 cards. One will be a squirrel, and one will almost always be a 1 blood card from your deck. This allows the player to have at least 1 card that they could play right away, since it would be extremely unfair for Leshy to send his cards at you, and you can't even play 1. It's an extremely common strategy amongst players of this game to take advantage of the fair hand mechanic, since if you always start with a 1 blood card, and you only have one blood card, well, you could pretty much guarantee that that card will always be in your hand at the start of a round. As a result, buffing up a powerful 1 blood card basically guarantees an instant kill at the beginning of every round. Or you could have a black goat as your one card, which would allow you to summon a very strong card right off the bat. Honestly, it's the best strategy in the game, at least in my opinion. Casey's mod got way easier once I figured this out. Goobert's painting. If you find all the sigils hidden in Act 3 and plug them into this pillar here, you're transported to Goo World, where Goobert lives. You'll find this frankly adorable painting that he made of him and Magnificus hugging. He's really insecure about his painting skills and automatically assumes that you hate it, but looking at it a second time really boosts his self-esteem, and he excitedly decides that he's going to show the painting to Magnificus. Unfortunately, if you do this, you find the painting during the finale with Goobert whited out. Magnificus seemed to love the painting, but only the part that included him. This is the biggest tragedy in the whole game, honestly. Like, it makes me so sad. And then Magnificus rubs it in your face that by destroying the game, you're killing your little goo friend. And honestly, Magnificus is the worst. I'm glad he dies. Goobert actually gets to pursue his passion in painting in Casey's mod, trying to replicate the cards in your deck with some limited success. Unfortunately, since Casey's mod is a prequel, this means that Leshy got so sick of his mediocre painting skills that he tried to get rid of him. Like, his entry in the book calls him a failure. I know that this probably originally referred to how he failed to find the old data, since he was trying to find it for Magnificus, but the Angler found it first. More on that later. But with the context of Casey's mod, this is just sad. Goobert is an extremely tragic character, is the point I'm trying to make. God damn. The Beaver card is best known for the fact that when it's placed on the board, it puts down a dam on either side of it. This is obviously useful for defense, but arguably the best part of the dams is that if you transfer a sigil onto the Beaver, the dams get them too. And this could be extremely useful. Exo has a really good video on it, go check it out. But probably the best known sigil dam combo is with the Fledgling sigil. The Fledgling sigil evolves the card it's on after one turn, and it turns the dams into god dams. Let's do a few more Fledgling ones, shall we? Child 14. If you put the Fledgling sigil on Child 13, then it turns into Child 14. Omega. If you put the Fledgling sigil onto the Alpha, then it evolves into an Omega. Awesome Opossum. Putting the Fledgling sigil onto the Opossum turns it into the Awesome Opossum. Luke's hard drive. So the whole gimmick, I guess you could say, of the Archivist fight is that it actually goes through your computer. Like, it pulls up your actual files and will display them on screen or play them out loud if they're audio. I don't really have a lot of examples of this because my cousin had nothing fun on her computer, but just take my word for it. However, when INSCRYPTION was ported for consoles, there came the whole issue of, well, how is that going to work if you're not on a computer? The solution was created that you would be going through Luke's hard drive, which actually makes more sense to me. I mean, it's definitely shocking when you realize that the files you're pulling up during the Archivist fight are your files, but you are supposed to be playing as Luke, so it makes sense that his files would be here. Some things that you can find in Luke's computer are a folder full of art that his fans made for him that he seems to love a lot, a picture of him and his deceased sister, a hard drive that belongs to his deceased sister that doesn't have anything in it, some terrible rap song that I guess Luke made. There's a document that kicks off the console ARG that I'm going to be talking about later. Luke apparently has 10,000 subscribers. They're gonna be so confused why he's not making videos anymore. That's so sad. Rebecca is from the Hex. So in Act 2 and Act 3, there's this green lady who says woof a lot and is self-aware of the fact that not only is she in a game, but that the game is terrible and corrupted and all the scribes are horrible people. PO3 ends up getting sick of her bad-mouthing him and rewrites her whole personality. This is actually a character from the Hex, called Rebecca. She first appeared in Combat Arena X, and then was included in pretty much every other game created by Lionel Snill after, usually as an NPC or a shopkeeper. She was portrayed as being sassy, especially during Walk, and also like the rest of the characters was aware that she was in a game. Between her 2 appearances, she doesn't seem to enjoy being a game character very much. I like her though, like she never really does anything, but I think that she's fun. I like her dialogue. I hope she keeps getting put into games, even if it makes her miserable. Great Kraken. The Great Kraken is a card that appears in the game. It's unlocked in Act 2 if you go around and take pictures of all the tentacles. It has a unique sigil, which is kind of a combination of the Waterborne sigil and the Fledgling sigil, where after one turn, it flips over, it turns into a random tentacle card. This is actually a reference to the Hex. The Great Kraken was a minor character in the Hex, whose corpse was seen in Secrets of Legendaria. One little quirk I noticed is that if you select the finale from the main menu and play it through, the game might randomly assign you the Great Kraken in your final deck with Leshy. I don't know why. Like, it's weird because it only appears in Act 2 in the main game, never in Act 1. However, it was later added to Casey's mod as part of the worst starter deck, in my opinion at least. It has 2 Kingfishers. Terrible. Official website. The official Inscryption website is actually pretty cool. It's set up as a computer with all the necessary links up on the screen. However, if you turn off the disk driver or just exit out of it on the screen, there's a lot more you can do. Opening up the notepad reveals the stoat urging you to play the game so that you can talk properly. You can also copy and paste him so you have your own little stoat on your computer. Just don't try to text him to anyone, it doesn't work. You can also see him if you open up Chrome. It opens up to YouTube and there's a trailer playing, and if you look on the recommended videos, there's a stoat analysis video where the stoat communicates with you through the title. Opening up Camworks gives you a handful of Lucky Carter videos. You can also open up Outlook to look through Luke's emails. You can find the email that Luke sent to Game Fuda, as well as the one that they sent back. And if you look through Luke's drafts, you can find an email that he started writing to Game Fuda before apparently changing his mind, which is actually pretty cool. What's even cooler is that the send email function actually worked at one point. Apparently, if you put in your own email address, you could send yourself a message from Luke's email. But like, it doesn't actually work anymore, so that's unfortunate. My personal favorite part of the website is that the bell and the scale works. Lonely Wizard shakes. Sometimes when you pause the game while the Lonely Wizard is doing his little dance, he starts shaking. I guess because he's not being stimulated anymore. Poor little guy. Stinky Moon. If you use the Stinky Sigil against the Moon in Act 1, it essentially wins you the fight since the Moon loses its attack. Leshy will actually comment on not only how much of a cheat that is, but on how it doesn't make any kind of logical sense. Because the Moon can't smell! This is something else that got taken out in Casey's mod, by the way. Grimora and Magnificus Rulebook. If you open up the rulebooks during the brief period of time you're playing with Grimora and Magnificus during the finale, there are actually a whole bunch of sigils created specifically for them that didn't show up in the game. Blood Guzzler is like the Bloodlust sigil from Casey's mod, except instead of the attack growing every time there's a kill, it's the health that grows. Haunter has the creature's sigils transfer into whichever card takes its spot on the board after it dies, and Magnificus has a bunch of Yu-Gi-Oh! References. Yeah, some of these are obviously jokes. Like, to activate the power of this card, you have to say Bloody Mary into a microphone. Gives off Night Shark vibes. Or this one for Magnificus that involves a VR headset. But I don't know. Kinda cool that they went through the effort to beef up the rulebooks a little, especially considering there's so much going on during the finale that not a lot of people would even think to look. Act 3B. Sometimes in Act 3, when the gift bot is destroyed, it gives you a B card. I was so weirdly delighted by this. Like, it's not a B bot or a B33, you know, like in Elite speak, and it didn't get a robotic redesign like the other carryover cards did. It's just a blue B. I love it. apparently this is pretty uncommon, so I just figured I'd share. Achievements are Magic the Gathering cards. All of the achievements in the game are Magic the Gathering cards. Just going through some that I have in my files. Incosis Insect, Face to Face, Uncage the Menagerie, Ancestral Vision, Miner's Bane, Grizzled Angler. Even Skullstorm, the ultimate challenge of Casey's mod, is a Magic the Gathering card. Leshy Folklore. So, in Slavic folklore, a Leshy is a forest spirit known for protecting the animals of the forest and being mischievous, leading travelers in the woods down the wrong path to get them lost and abducting children who weren't baptized. His appearance was described as being covered head to toe with green hair, having bark-like skin and blue blood that gives his appearance a slightly blue tinge. This was very clearly the inspiration for INSCRYPTION's Leshy, the old man who lives in the forest with the beast who roleplays leading you deep into the woods. Curious Egg. Introduced in Casey's mod, the Curious Egg is a really weird card that only comes in this one deck. Unlike the Raven Egg card that hatches automatically after one turn, the Curious Egg only hatches after certain stipulations are met. You have to have at least one card from each tribe, you have to have cards with the attack ranging from 1 to 5, and the health ranging from 1 to 5. If you succeed, it hatches into a Hydra. It's a really good card, but it's really, really hard to get it. Every time I've managed it, I had to bump the Ouroboros up at the last minute, and then I could only use the Hydra during the final battle. Yeah, it feels really good when you finally do manage to hatch them, but they're kinda not worth it at all if you aren't able to use them until the very end. Like, you're just carrying all these eggs around that can't do anything. But I don't know. That's just my opinion, I guess. Sacrificing the black goat or the pelt. Most of the time when you sacrifice a card to the Bone Lord, he's pleased and rewards you with a boon for 1 bone at the beginning of each battle. However, with some specific cards, you will get a different result. Sacrificing the black goat will make the Bone Lord very pleased, and the resulting boon gives you 8 bones. However, if you sacrifice a pelt, the Bone Lord is offended and gives you nothing. Deep Beneath. This refers to the glitch card, also known as the static card, which is a rare card that appears in Act 1, which is just static. It doesn't have a name, and instead of a description, Leshy just says a bunch of binary when it comes up. It has the ability to transform into any card, which is cool and all, but it messes with the fair hand mechanic, so off to the Bone Lord you go. We find out in Act 2 that the angler actually found the old data while fishing down deep and gave it to Leshy, and the binary code that pops up when this card is introduced translates to Deep Beneath. So it's pretty easy to assume that this card is a piece of the old data, and that this is what Leshy used to take over the game, backed up by the fact that one of PO3's bots pull up a similarly glitched card out of the ground in Act 2, which PO3 then uses to do exactly what Leshy did. Meet in Safe. During Act 1, after some prompting from the Stoat, you will find a combination in the handbook and unlock the safe, finding the Stink Bug card. However, if you're playing through a second time and already know the combination, you can open the safe during the tutorial. In doing that, you'll just find a pile of meat. This, presumably, being the meat that Leshy serves you when you win. This actually makes sense, I guess, because in Act 2, when you're looking for meat for the Hound, you find it in the safe. Same combination and everything. And it's funny because once the safe is open, it's open. Later on, when you're actually meant to open the safe, the Stink Bug card is just there, hanging out, which would imply that the card was under the meat before. Leshy is really such a gentleman, huh? Also, if you plug in that combination in Casey's mod, you get the meat. You need another combination to get the bonus record. So it's a weird time portal safe, I guess. I don't know. Goat Eye. In Act 1, when you carve your eye out with the knife unless she gives you a replacement, there's actually a goat eye that you could pick up. If you choose the goat eye and then you draw the black goat, you see the black goat as like a little kawaii maid. One-eyed winning card. If you take your eye out during the final boss fight with Leshy and then win the game without the film, the resulting winning card will be missing an eye. Hungry Child and Undead Cat. So, the Many Lives sigil allows you to put down a card on the board and just use it as a sacrifice over and over again. The two cards in Act 1 with this sigil are the Cat and Child 13. However, this sigil is apparently not unlimited. If you sacrifice the cat 9 times in a round, it turns into the Undead Cat. Likewise, if you sacrifice Child 13 times, it turns into Hungry Child, which is another reference to sacrifices must be made. I guess the sigil is called Many Lives and not Unlimited Lives, so it makes sense. Although I can tell you from personal experience, the card Pharaoh's Pet from Act 2 has the Many Lives sigil and does not have a limit. Trust me on this one, trust me. Unused cards. Reddit user Def Cards Curtis did a little digging in the game files and ended up discovering a few cards that weren't used in the game. 2 of them ended up being used in Casey's mod. One of them is the Lambergeier, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, the Lambergeier, and also this clearly non-PO-free Stoat, which was also in Act 2, but more pixely. There is also a different version of the Stoat. Its mouth is closed and it looks more chubby. Odds are that this was the bloated Stoat. And sacrifices must be made. If you sacrificed a Warren to put down the Stoat, then it turned into the bloated Stoat. So I'm guessing that there was a point in development where the Stoat wasn't an important main villain, and that's why this art is here.
Fun fact, in the progress of making the game, the Stoat existed before PO3 did, and then at one point I put them together as the same character. So for a while the Stoat was just a Stoat, and then I was trying to figure out, like, who is this Stoat?
The rest of the unused cards are kinda weird. There's this nice scene of a fox chasing a rabbit, which is way more detailed than any of the other cards in the game. There's a sinkhole card, and the sacrificing stones. I don't know if that means that the sigil sacrifice ceremony worked differently at one point, because there is no other card like this in the game. But yeah, kinda cool. It's like a glimpse into an alternate version of the game. Doss and Bell Tentacle. The Doss card is pretty much just a better version of the beaver. It has a similar gimmick in that it puts down a chime on either side of it for defense. However, what makes it special is that it's extremely protective over its chimes. It will attack anything and anyone who hurts its chimes. However, what's super interesting about this card is that the Doss also protects the Bell Tentacle. I guess because it has a bell on it? But yeah, if the Bell Tentacle is next to the Douse, it will defend the Bell Tentacle just like its own chimes. And if the Bell Tentacle is next to one of the Douse's chimes, it powers up its attack just like the real bell does. Putting the Douse's sigil on the Bell Tentacle makes it so that it can essentially just power itself, making it so that the Bell Tentacle can potentially be a one-hit win. So yeah, these two cards have weirdly good chemistry with each other. Mycologist fight. The Mycologist is introduced in Act 1 as these mad scientist types that can combine 2 of the same cards together to create a single powerful card. After beating 2 scribes in Act 2, the Mycologist hut appears, and unlike in Act 1, they will only combine specific cards. If you get them all the cards they ask for, they give you this key. And then in Act 3, when you're at the Eastern Waypoint, if you walk to the right, you find the Mycologists. They literally take over PO3's body, and he's very terrified and traumatized by the experience. They need you to help them with their experiments, and so they battle you. Their fight is the hardest one in the whole game, in my opinion. I am embarrassed to say how many times I had to do this fight. If you manage to beat them, though, it's revealed that the Mycologist has been combining cards this whole time in order to gain access to the old data. And they managed to accomplish this, giving you a pretty powerful card based on your card stats and sigils all smushed together as thanks. The Bone Lord. The Bone Lord is introduced in Act 1, and you're able to sacrifice one of your cards to him in exchange for more bones. His skull is also in Leshy's cabin. Then in Act 2, in Grimoire's basement, there's a casket with a mysterious figure in it. That kinda looks like Baby from Sister Location? Am I crazy? Okay, anyways, it asks for an offering. Get both halves of the broken obol and put them next to each other in battle, and they'll combine into the ancient obol. Offer this to the mysterious figure, and they let you into the casket. This is where you properly meet the Bone Lord. He tells Luke to listen to the old data and demands that Luke worship it, and if you show willingness to do that, then he gives you some gifts, including a card that kinda looks like a tapeworm. Am I crazy? It's actually one of the Bone Lord's horns. A cool detail is that his sprite actually loses a horn once he gives it to you, and he also gives you this key. Then in Act 3, if you go to the recreation of Grimoire's crypt, you will be able to unlock this room and meet the Bone Lord once more. He imparts the secrets of the old data, but doesn't let us see them. Luke, however, gets to see all of it.
What the fuck, man?
And so does PO3, who is equally as disturbed. The Bone Lord then disappears from the rest of the game. Water Tower. The Snowline part of the map in Act 1 used to have water towers in it. According to Mullins, they only ever existed in the beta.
In the map that rolls out, there used to be this geometry of these like little water towers in the beta, and I removed them because they were causing, it was like a bug where like two of them were overlapping and looking stupid, and then I kind of thought it was just easier to remove them, and I also thought it was kind of strange how there was like water towers in the map but not in like the pixel art world in part 2, so that's why I removed the water towers.
Which is weird because I remember them, and I definitely did not play the beta, but like maybe it's just a false memory, I don't know. Quitting a run in Casey's mod. So if you're ever halfway through a run in Casey's mod, or not even, if you're ever doing a run in Casey's mod and you decide that, you know what, actually this isn't working out, let me just start over, Leshy does not like that. In fact, Leshy punishes you. He basically calls you a coward, and instead of giving you 2 pelts to pick out whatever cards you want, he only gives you 1 pelt and a possum. And I'm not exactly a possum hater, but yeah, it sucks that you can only pick out 1 card. Typically, the best thing to do to sort of circumnavigate this is to just let yourself die and start over. You know, that way you don't get punished. Rebecca knows when you reset. If you exit out of Act 2 and then hit the new game button again to start Act 2 over, Rebecca will actually call you out on it. She's mostly just annoyed that you doing that is a huge inconvenience for her and asks you to not do it again. Deleting file. During the Archivist fight, you are told to choose a file from your computer, which is turned into a card. If the card dies, then the file is apparently deleted from your computer. However, going to the file's location after it dies, you'll find a note from PO3 admitting that he can't actually delete it and tries to guilt you into doing the honorable thing and deleting it yourself. If you actually do it though, he reacts, saying, "Wow, you actually deleted the file? Haha, did you expect a reward?" And yeah, you don't get an achievement or anything, he just mocks you. So apparently the original intent was that the game was going to delete a file from your computer, but it freaked out the test players, and also Steam doesn't allow games that delete files, you know, because it's like considered malware. So this funny little solution was created instead. Original Bone Deck. In the early builds of Casey's mod, the Bone Deck contained the Alpha, the Warren, and the Rat King. However, it was changed to the Raccoon, Dire Wolf Pup, and Coyote before the final release. Exo has a video where he plays with the original deck to see how good it was. Check that out if you want to see it, because I never played with it, so I don't have any actual footage of my own. I can't give an opinion. Trader rejects Pelt Lice. Pelt Lice is a card exclusive to Casey's mod. It's activated whenever you put a pelt on the board. One of the funniest details with this card is that it apparently infests all your pelts. So if you go to the trader and you have Pelt Lice in your deck, she will just straight up refuse to do business with you. Rebecca fight rumor. So there's a pretty widespread rumor in the Inscryption community that the character of Rebecca was supposed to have a boss fight, with some people saying that it would have been in Act 2, and some people saying Act 3, with Daniel Mullins apparently confirming this in a tweet that he later went on to delete. Daniel Mullins actually acknowledged this rumor in a live stream and said that it wasn't true.
Rumor has it that Rebecca was once a planned fight for Act 3 of Inscryption. Is this true? Thanks so much.
It's not true, but it's really funny because I've seen this thing where people say that there was like a deleted tweet that I said that, but like it's not true, but it's hilarious that like the evidence would be a deleted tweet because it's like there's no evidence it ever existed, so I guess.
And sometime later, someone claiming to be the one who started this rumor posted on Rebecca's wiki page. They claim that they came up with the rumor because they wanted to troll the wiki editors, and it ended up getting out of control. So yeah, there's no actual legitimacy to this rumor at all, but hey, I guess it would have been kind of cool if she was a boss fight. The Blue Man. One of the tarot cards read to you by the trader in Act 3 is the Tower card. She talks about the creation of Inscryption and how all she really knows is that there was a building, an isosceles triangle, and a blue man who visited while the game was getting created. This is a very clear reference to Irving from the Hex. Irving was Lionel Snill's GameWorks assistant, basically a piece of AI who helped him construct his games.
Irving came as part of the GameWorks package. I was a little hesitant about using an AI at first, but he became really helpful.
GameWorks is the engine that Lionel created all of his games in, and its logo is an isosceles triangle. So yeah, based on this card, as well as the Empress card that talks about Casey, GameWorks is the engine that Inscryption was built in, and Irving was involved with its development at some point. Maybe that's why there's minor characters from the Hex in here. He was responsible for reassigning NPCs after all. Luke switches shirts. The first time that Luke meets Amanda, there's a glitch and he's suddenly wearing another shirt. This has led to a lot of people theorizing that Luke is in on it somehow, and that he and Amanda faked his death at the end. However, just from the bits I found from the people who worked on the game, this just seems to be a continuity error.
The point where his shirt changes in a cut, and like it's mostly that it doesn't really ruin the experience for many people, but it's like when I see it, I have a deep cringe.
Well, and in your games, it might have additional meaning behind it, which is
and of course people are going to speculate that it does. Yeah,
that was like when people saw the shirt change, and like I think it was in the middle of Act 2 because my shirt changed, and everybody was like, "It's lore, it's lore, baby." Yep.
Secret Rooms Act 2. So, there are a few rooms that you could find in Act 2 if you're poking around at the walls, or if you have Magnificus's eyeglass, which makes things a lot easier. I think the most well-known is the woodcarver, who is hiding out behind the rabbit and the trap. She talks about how she saw the old data and she refuses to tell you anything about it, and straight up says that the scribes don't care about human life. You can also find 2 photos hidden in the walls. There's a woman up by the fishing dock who might be Casey. I have literally no idea who else it could possibly be, but it isn't actually known for sure. And then Barry Wilkinson's ID is hidden in Magnificus's tower. Barry Wilkinson. Within the lore of Inscryption, Barry Wilkinson, aka Big Ear, worked for the Department of Defense in the 1950s and was the one who smuggled the Karnaffal code out of the USSR through the floppy disk, having hidden it among many other floppy disks. According to the trader in Act 3, Barry was discovered and killed for his crime. His ID is shown if you go into this dark area in Magnificus's tower, as well as when Luke is allowed to view the old data. It's hard to read, but it shows that his full name is Barry Reginald Wilkinson. And interestingly enough, one of the death cards in Act 1 is named Reginald, which might be a reference to him, since Kaminsky and Casey appear in the death cards too. There's also a theory that he is related to Lionel Snill from the Hex, since all of Lionel's characters came to life, which might mean that he had some of the old data on his computer at one point. But as far as I've seen, that's never been confirmed. The cabin door is a card. This is a weird one. I didn't even notice this until one of my winning cards ended up on the bottom of the door. But look, there are 2 4s on the bottom of the door. In fact, looking at the entirety of the door, it's set up exactly like a card. It's split up into 3 segments, with the bottom segment containing a number on the left and a number on the right, just like the attack and health stats on a card. There are also 3 lights dangling over the door, which could potentially be blood. So it's a 4/4/3 blood card? What does this mean? Well, nothing to do with the ARG, apparently. Even the Google Doc dedicated to all of INSCRYPTION's secrets is at a loss, noting that the meaning is uncertain. However, it is worth noting that this side room here, as it appears in the original 2D pixel version of the game, does not seem to have a door, unless she was using this room to hide the new game button. So it would make sense that he would need a door, unless his whole deal is that he makes cards by taking pictures of things. So did he take a picture of a door and then use the resulting card to hide the new game button? It's the most likely answer, and I'm kind of okay with that. It's just a subtle background detail that adds a little bit of depth to the universe and to Leshy's plan in general. If it has any deeper meaning, it hasn't been discovered yet. Hammer 100 limit. So in Act 2 and Act 3, you get a hammer that you can use to remove any card from your board if you don't want it there anymore. However, I heard a rumor that the hammer doesn't just take the card out, it actually just inflicts 100 damage onto it. So if you have a card with over 100 health, it'll still be on the board. Everyone say thank you to Pharaoh's pet Ouroboros for helping out with this experiment. I told you he's the best card. But yes, it's true. Ouroboros was at 101 health. I hit it with the hammer. It went down to 1 health. Hammer's only got a limit of 100. Act 3 glitches into Act 1. Sometimes randomly in Act 1, something from Act 3 will glitch in and then abruptly disappear if you interact or get close to it. In the 2 instances I found, it was one of the tarot cards and this camera robot thing. Cardawful DOS. So, the DOS is a really weird card when you look into it. First of all, it is a card in the real world. As mentioned before, Cardawful is a real German card game, and in German student decks, the DOS has a value of 2. I've been pronouncing it 2 different ways, haven't I? Oh well, too late now. Traditionally, the DOS card has had a picture of a wild boar, and in some cases is portrayed as the DOS of bells, where it is portrayed with 2 bells, which is very clearly the inspiration for INSCRYPTION's DOS card, and the original German version of the card pops up when Luke is viewing the old data. The DOS is also involved in solving one of the ciphers in the ARG, and at the end of the mycologist fight, the mycologist combines the DOS with a gem detonator to create a piece of the old data. So this card very clearly has a connection to the Cardawful code that most of the other cards in the game just do not have. Control-C. Hitting Control-C while Act 2 is booting up allows you to type in commands, and this is important for the ARG. Watching through Luke's videos, there is this note that he wrote that contains hints for a cipher to be typed in here. Once the cipher is discovered, it unlocks a chat log, supposedly from Casey Hobbs, that contains hints to the next cipher. Going on like this, we end up unlocking several more chat logs from a variety of characters. Barry Wilkinson, Kaminsky, Russian guy. Some of these logs are in different languages, so need to be translated. I'm going to be getting into the individual elements of the ciphers in just a moment. I decided to split them up because this is an iceberg and it seemed more appropriate to the format. But basically going through and discovering all the ciphers and typing them in is how you beat the ARG. Also, my cousin works with computers and she attempted to use a command to delete the old data. And if you do that, it just comes up with, "You cannot do that," which is hilarious, and I thought that it deserved a shout out. Beeper. So way back in Pony Island, there was this audio clip that if you played backwards, it kind of sounded like a beeper, perhaps. It didn't actually mean anything, it was just a bunch of gibberish that sounded like a sentence. At least at first. Daniel Mullins ended up patching the game to give it a meaning. Flemonade did a good job covering this if you want more information. But yeah, so a beeper perhaps became a thing in the Daniel Mullins community. And then when one of the clues in the Inscryption ARG was simply perhaps with 2 question marks, some fans that have been around from the beginning immediately knew what that meant. Going through the credits of the 3D assets, there is a beeper listed here, despite a beeper not appearing in the game. And the name of who supposedly made the beeper is kind of suspicious. It resembles Lou Natus, the CEO of Game Fuda from the Hex, who is also the devil. Lou is for Lucifer, and similarly, the little devil guy in Pony Island is named Louie. And Natus is Satan spelled backwards. The devil has been a recurring element in Mullen's games since Pony Island, and it seems that he's still kicking around. And interestingly enough, the link under it is fake. All the other links to the 3D assets are real, but this one doesn't go anywhere. It turned out the solution was the first part of the link, before the 2 question marks. Letterbox. When meeting the Bone Lord in Act 2, if you set the game to the letterbox orientation, then a little code pops up for a split second at the very top. This is used to complete one of the ciphers. Beneath the Surface. Beneath the Surface is a game created as a companion to the Hex. It was created by Carla, a character in the Hex, and despite being an extremely simple little fishing game, it holds a lot of secrets. It even holds the true ending of the Hex. More on that later. But it also has the solution to one of the hints to decode the text log. So the hint is 56-57M. So if you go into Beneath the Surface and you go down between 56 to 57 meters, you'll find a really familiar looking floppy disk. And this long stretch of nonsense text that you can't read. The ARG in the Hex was solved by putting in a cipher.cipher file into the game data, and if you do the same thing here and then go back and fish up the disk again, the text will now read, "Who knows what secrets are inscribed upon it," with some of the letters replaced with numbers and symbols. Separating out the numbers and symbols, you get 0044!free, which is the solution to this part of the cipher. Stop. So one of the hints for the ARG is 2K-free-2. And some people notice that on Luke's computer, there are sticky notes that look pretty similar to this hint. Except that instead of 2s, there are pigs. But again, the Douse is a real card from a real card game and it represents 2. Also, it's a pig. So clearly, the 2s are meant to be the Douse card. But what about the others? Well, K in card games typically refers to king, and there is a Rat King card. And the only card that is associated with the number 3 is the Mantis God, since it hits 3 times. I wasn't able to do this myself, but if you open up the game and place down the cards, Douse, Mantis God, Rat King, and Douse again, in that order, the names all change to spell out the word stop, which is some good advice. And also the answer to the puzzle. What lies ahead? So, you remember a few levels earlier I mentioned that sacrifices must be made was used in the ARG? Well, now we're going to talk about that. One of the hints in one of the ciphers was back to beginning, which is clearly supposed to be back to the beginning. And some people noticed that sacrifices must be made was updated the same day that Inscryption came out. And finding that suspicious, started exploring it. It was found that if you put the cipher.cipher file, similar to Beneath the Surface, into the game data of the original Game Jam version and then beat the game, the mysterious stranger will start acting alarmed by the new data that you put into his game. He'll start learning a bunch of stuff you didn't want to know and then finish off by saying, "I cannot unlearn what lies ahead," with what lies ahead being the solution. Birch Kid. So, one of the clues to decode the second chunk of the text log is Birch Kid, which might actually be a familiar name if you were paying attention to Luke's YouTube videos. In his first proper video that we get to see, he says that he's going to open up a pack of Catch Monster cards, and that he gets a rare Birch Kid.
Okay, and our first rare is a Birch Kid.
So, Catch Monsters is actually real, or at least it was planned to be. All the way back in 2014, Daniel Mullins had a Catch Monsters game planned out with the intention of having the game be a more deep and adult-oriented version of Pokemon. He started a Kickstarter in order to get it crowdfunded. Unfortunately, the project was not fully funded and ultimately abandoned. However, on his Kickstarter, he uploaded a demo of the game and you could still download and play it. Choosing the Elemental team, you get the creature Birch Kid, and you get to see that his main ability is pacifism, which fits into the cipher and is part of the solution. So yeah, Daniel Mullins used his old forgotten Kickstarter in his ARG, That's pretty crazy. And surprisingly, that isn't the only time that he did something like this. This guy moaned. Okay, so you know how Luke Carter found those coordinates on the inscription cards and went to them and found a floppy disk and then this whole game started? Well, some fans on the Daniel Mullins Discord decided, hey, what if we went to those coordinates? Will there actually be anything out there? So the coordinates ended up being in Vancouver, and Daniel Mullins and Kevin Saxby, the guy who plays Luke Carter, met them there. And Daniel Mullins attacked them. It was a joke, but they ended up getting this floppy disk that they opened on stream. And the only thing on there was a text file that said, "This guy moaned."
This is all that's in it, is "This guy moaned."
Which is kind of hilarious. But, as it turns out, "This guy moaned" is the name of an old Reddit account Daniel Mullins used to have 6 years ago. And using that account, he made a thread asking for feedback on a card game he was trying to put together based on ancient Rome under the sea, posting an entire album of artwork for the cards. These cards were, incredibly, referenced in the actual game. Luke and his sister Elle used to play with them. Looking through these old cards, there's one called Manatee Antony, and one of the ciphers has a hint that just says manatee. So yeah, the solution here involved both digging up a floppy disk in the woods and a years-old abandoned project in a Reddit account nobody heard about. Absolutely insane. I am learned too much. If you mess with your save file, you could add story event 167, which then if you click on the Bone Lord's skull 10 times, triggers this event where Leshy turns into the Bone Lord briefly and says, "I am learned too much," which is part of one of the ciphers. Kaminsky Data Storage Manufacturing. The third chat log, once decoded, has a web address in it, and if you go to it, it takes you to Kaminsky Data Storage Manufacturing. There's nothing you could actually do there now, but at one point it had an order form where you could enter your address. Free floppy disks were mailed out. Uwawa Sprite on Twitch was one of the people who received these floppy disks and opened it on stream, discovering a 3-part code, with him clearly having the second part. It seemed like the rest of the code was more or less brute forced, although the other 2 disks were finally received and put together, creating the message, "Thank you for playing Inscription, friend." The Great Transcendence succeeded. The ARG that is hidden not only in Inscription, but in all of Daniel Mullins' work culminates in you getting all the characters to a YouTube link that if you go to, has this video. The stone is alive! So at the end of Inscription, PO3 attempts to fulfill the Great Transcendence, which is just his dumb way of saying that he's going to upload the game onto Steam, but then Leshy pops in and rips his head off and supposedly stops him. I always thought this was weird, because the game is on Steam. That's how people have been able to play it. But here it is. PO3 is not only still alive, but we are shown that he was able to resume upload and successfully get it up on Steam. How exactly he's alive is unknown, honestly. Maybe he managed to copy himself onto Luke's computer. He did have access to his hard drive, and in fact, as mentioned before, if you go on the Inscription website and explore Luke's computer, you find PO3 as the stoat, literally looking like he does in the video. So yeah, this is the official ending to Inscription. The evil plan succeeded, the game is on Steam, and now console, so hey, that's a little bit sketchy. And PO3 is still floating around out there doing whatever it is he's doing. 27341. So one of the hints in the ARG was F!00R, with some people noticing the sticky note on Luke's computer talking about a mirror and flipping it around to floor roof, which made people start looking around for floors and roofs. There's really only one roof in the whole game, which is the exterior of Leshy's cabin in Act 2. And look, there's numbers on the floor next to the roof, which is the safe combination. But if you take the numbers on the floor, 273, and then count the missing tiles on the left and the right, then you get 27341, which was correct. They were able to solve the ARG with this number. However, sometime later, YouTuber Flemonade made a video on the ARG, and Daniel Mullins himself apparently watched the video and told Flemonade that, actually, no, the floor puzzle was never properly solved.
I talked to Daniel Mullins a little bit on Twitter after making the video, and he told me that a solution for one of the puzzles was incorrect. In particular, this one. The one with the cabin, the floor equals roof one.
This was, a huge shock. So with some hints from Daniel Mullins, Flemonade set out to finally solve this mystery. As it turns out, Daniel Mullins had actually hid the code in the floor textures, which you don't actually get to see in-game, so Flemonade straight up had to go into the game files and zoom all the way in to see the tiny little numbers to get the code. Honestly, I like the roof one more. It makes more sense to me. But yeah, this is the solution. It's just a huge coincidence that the code Daniel Mullins hid in the textures is the same one that fans initially found on the ground and on the roof in Act 2. This is absolutely I don't know how, but you used the wrong formula and got the correct answer moment, and it's kind of amazing. But I also find this story weirdly nice. Like, in his video, Flemonade is talking about how he didn't get to help solve the ARG, but he wishes that he did.
I started playing the game a little after it was solved, so I was sad I wasn't able to participate. This must have been really confusing when it first was getting solved. I wasn't there again. I wish I was, but...
But then, in the end, he's the one who ends up solving the ARG's final mystery. Sato is in control. Sato is a character from the Hex who serves as a sort of antagonist for the patrons of the Six Pint Inn, taunting and torturing the player characters for seemingly no real reason, with the only somewhat understandable motive we ever get from her is when she talks to Lazarus, telling him that because he helped her, she'll help him. It's later revealed that Sato was created by Carla Deso because she was upset at the lack of female characters in the game. It is implied that Carla turned Sato into a virus, or a demon, or something like that, purely out of spite. At the very end of the Hex, it's revealed that she escaped and entered the real world, and if you get the true ending in Beneath the Surface, she infects your computer. Later on in Inscryption, when Amanda shoots Luke at the end, for a single frame, we can see that she has Sato's face. Some people think that Amanda is just Sato in disguise. However, Sato actually appears earlier in the game, with her eye covering up Luke's eye for a frame while he's clearly in the process of losing his mind. The final conclusion made in the big Inscryption lore Google Doc is that Sato is the one in control the entire time. That PO3 had actually made a deal with Sato, and she brought him back to life and made sure that the game got uploaded, and that she was influencing both Luke and Amanda so that she could get access to the old data. This is just a theory though, but Sato is very clearly influencing the events of Inscryption to at least some extent. We just don't know exactly what she's doing or what she wants. Strip club. There is a strip club in the files of Inscryption. I don't know. Also, it seems like Daniel Mullins had absolutely no idea about it either.
What is this thing about the strip club? What the hell is that?
Where does it say that?
It's this person saying Han, they're talking about the strip club in the file. What is that? What are you talking about?
I don't know, man.
Strip club?
Did you put a strip club in the game? You got rid of the water towers and you put in a strip club?
I think I do know what they're talking about. Yeah, so I used a free asset bundle for some of the hologram models in part 3. And so I didn't remove all of them from the project, so some of them were unused, and I think I remember there were like all these building names, and I bet one of them was called Strip Club, so yeah, that's the answer to that.
Turns out it was just a leftover from stuff Daniel Mullins had downloaded while making the game. So, no mystery here. It's just a random strip club. Amber. Amber is the name of the Pike Mage as revealed in the console ARG. I'm like weirdly glad that they gave her a name. She was always really overshadowed by the other two mages. They appear in the other acts in somewhat significant roles, and their pain and torment is explored way more. So, good for her, she got a little bit of focus. Magnificus isn't a tree. According to Daniel Mullins, Magnificus is not a tree person. He just has, like, a really, 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 really long beard that covers every inch of his body, and is green for some reason.
Yeah, is Magnificus a Christmas tree?
No, I agree that he looks like one, but he's supposed to be a beard guy. He's a wizard whose beard is so big it covers his entire body.
Oh! But I haven't gotten to him yet, so I haven't seen
Yeah.
it. But is the beard, like, also made out of, like, foliage, or?
It's not really. But the thing is, it's like kind of greenish, so it's confusing. I grant that, but it's just like it's like a beard that like whoa, and then it goes all.
I genuinely thought he was supposed to look like a pine tree with two branched arms. Or maybe a paintbrush? Cause he paints? But nah, I guess the joke here is that he is a wizard with just an extremely absurd beard. Mycologists are Daniel Mullins' dad. The live-action mycologists and the mycologist boss fight are actually played by Daniel Mullins' dad. Going into the credits, we see that a Mark Mullins is credited as playing the mycologist, and Daniel Mullins has also said that they are played by his father.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know if they know it's my dad, but they know what I'm talking about. The mycologist secret in part 3 is my dad. Two of my dads stitched together.
Woodcarver ARG. So the Woodcarver ARG is a fan-made ARG that was read by the Daniel Mullins Discord admins. As far as I can tell, it's not canon at all, but it's pretty cool, so I figured I'd talk about it a little bit. Basically, the Woodcarver was posting on the Discord, and if you interacted with her, you'd receive a series of images, most of which contained hidden codes. So you'd also post strange videos, corrupt servers, change her profile. There seemed to be some relation between this and Casey's mod. The fan-made trailer showed Casey discovering the old data and was literally shown by the actor who played Luke on a live stream, with Daniel Mullins sitting right next to him. But this seems to be more like fan interaction than like they planned this whole thing out. But like I said, it's an interesting thing to look through. I posted the Google Doc in the description if you want to see more. Morse code. So there's a shocking amount of Morse code in this game. Like, more than you'd probably expect. Anyone who went through the main ARG would know about the Morse code in the Archivist fight. Which, honestly, yeah, now that I know that, it's very obvious that it's Morse code. It apparently translates to Big Ear, which, as mentioned earlier, is Barry Wilkinson's nickname. This box in PO3's factory is blinking in Morse code too, and it says no chance. These are the solutions to one of the hints within the ciphers. There is also Morse code that has been placed into the game specifically for PlayStation players. One of the best parts of playing this game on the PS4 is how much the controller has been integrated. Every time something dramatic happens, it's vibrating and putting on a light show, and it's honestly so delightful. However, as it turns out, there are 2 points in the game where the controller is reacting in a suspicious way. At the end of Act 1, when you find the new game button and you stand in the corner behind the corpse pile, the controller vibrates in a way that seems like a pattern. And in Act 3, when you're standing in front of this lit up box I mentioned earlier, the controller starts blinking. But it's blinking in a completely different way that doesn't match up at all. Apparently both of these instances are Morse code, and if translated they spell out parts and James respectively, which is absolutely crazy in my opinion, but I love it. That is the most clever implementation of a controller I've ever heard of. The game takes place in 2009. The console version of the Archivist fight actually reveals the exact date that this game takes place on. Going into Luke's thumbnail folder, you'll find the thumbnail he made for either his Inscryption pack opening video or his Inscryption conspiracy quest, and the Archivist specifically says that he made that thumbnail yesterday. Now, the file is dated 10/12/2009, and if you beat the game, the chapters are dated, and Act 3 is shown to take place on 10/16 and 10/17. But while filming, I made a file just before the archivist fight, and he also referred to it as being from yesterday. So I think yesterday just means very recently. So we know this file is one of Luke's most recent, and it's dated 2009, meaning that that is when the game takes place. And even before the console version was released, it was apparently always Daniel Mullen's intention to have the game set around this time.
When does Inscryption take place? I did imagine it was like, it wasn't exactly modern day, like it wasn't 2020, and I imagined it was like in the range of between like 2009 and 2012 kind of. But if something in there contradicts that, then don't quote me on it.
This actually leads to an inconsistency in the timeline though, because Casey met some guy heavily implied to be Luke at a convention and mentions that he has a YouTube channel, and Casey was said by her mother to have died a long time ago. YouTube was created in 2005, meaning that she couldn't have been dead for more than 4 years, which isn't exactly a long time ago. Also, the emails on the website are dated 2021, which is inconsistent, but I don't know how canon the website is supposed to be. But I like that it makes sense that Luke is literally recording the gameplay footage just by pointing a camera at the screen. OBS wasn't released until 2012, and I think Luke is supposed to be an amateur YouTuber anyways, so it makes sense that he didn't know any other way to screen record. And most of the technology in this game isn't too modern, so it does more or less fit. Leshy talks telepathically. So while I was watching one of the live streams that Daniel Mullins did with Kevin Saxby, I was surprised when he said this.
See, the way I imagine it is that he's not actually talking. Like he's beaming thoughts into your brain. That's why like the eyes are swirling and it's like the reverberation. That's kind of how I imagined it. So it's like, in a way, it's kind of like it sounds like it is. That's how, just in my head.
So that's just like his voice.
It's like, it's
in
kind
a
of
way.
like you're like womp 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 in your head, and then you'd kind of just like understand the words.
Now, I never really gave any thought as to why Leshy's eyes got all swirly when he talks. I just thought, you know, it was supposed to be stylistic or something. But yeah, I guess there is a reason for it. It's also worth noting that there's a part in Act 2 where Leshy speaks telepathically to the player. It straight up says that that's what he's doing. This seems to be a thing with all the scribes though, although I don't believe that it actually says that any of them are speaking telepathically in that moment. It only says it about Leshy. So I guess it's up to you if this should be seen as canon, but I personally find it kind of cool and interesting. James Cobb. So, as at least somewhat expected, the console ports for Inscryption weren't really compatible with the ARG. The ARG relied so much on being on the computer, it just wouldn't work on the console. However, Daniel Mullins gave us console players an entirely new ARG, which is kicked off once you find this document on Luke's hard drive. I already talked about some of the parts of the ARG, like the Morse code on the PlayStation controller. There's also a part during PO3's fight in Act 2 when you hurt the melter, and he's supposed to make a noise that comes out of your controller. Supposed to. I could not get this to work no matter how much I messed with my controller settings.
It didn't.
Here's the audio that's supposed to play though. This ARG has taken several years off my life. My game broke at one point. Well, either way, going through all the steps of unlocking the dev card and then recreating it in Act 3, you managed to unlock this absolutely crazy lore. So, basically, James Cobb was the original Ruby Maid's pupil that Magnificus was torturing. However, unlike the other pupils, James liked the torture. And this made Magnificus really uncomfortable. So he approached Irving at the GameWorks and asked if they could get rid of James. And Irving told him that he could get a new NPC to be Magnificus's pupil, but Magnificus would have to find a new place for James. PO3 agreed to take him and turn him into a card, but his scanner didn't work on flesh, so he was sent to the mycologist to be turned into a robot one piece at a time. However, once he got to be 75% robot, he went crazy. And he still wasn't able to be turned into a card. So PO3 just sliced off his human head and replaced it with a gun, turning him into the Plasma Jimmy card, which was confirmed by the pattern he shot into PO3's floor. And then PO3 hid James's human head inside the melter. which is why when you talk to the Melter, there's a second voice just under the Melter's voice who is screaming for help. I actually went back to Markiplier's playthrough since he started playing the game not too long after it came out, and the Melter had the second voice even back then.
Let me out. Not another... What was that?
Going back to one of Kevin Saxby's streams, it shown that Daniel Mullins didn't have this entire backstory plotted out yet, but he did intend for something flesh-based to be trapped inside the Melter.
The Smelter bot, like, I think has, like, a living thing inside of them. Like the Smelter is like a robot, but there's like a living thing trapped in it.
That's what they were saying.
Yeah.
That's so fucked up. What a horrible fate.
Yeah. I think maybe the thing inside is like a meat bot.
He also really likes talking about how much he loves Plasma Jimmy.
Hey Dan, do you have a favorite character from Inscryption or one you relate to? Says Chase is Panini.
I don't know if I relate to any, but
you imagine like PO3, his
Plasma
personality
Jimmy.
really just
Plasma Jimmy.
Oh my god.
No, my favorite character, Plasma Jimmy. Come on.
So, the seeds for this story were always there, even if they weren't fully planned out. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised if James Cobb or Plasma Jimmy were a character in Daniel Mullins' next game. I mean, this is a really deep, detailed part of the lore, and it's just so weird to base an entire ARG off of it when it doesn't affect the story at all. And, I mean, like, Rebecca jumped over from the Hex, so maybe James will jump over too. And that's it. This has been an absolutely exhausting iceberg, but I'm glad I made it. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I did justice to the game and to all the people who worked to uncover these secrets. Once again, please check out the Google Docs because that's where all the real hard work was. I am admittedly burnt out on Inscryption. Going through and finding all this stuff was super tedious at times. Like, I played through Act 1 10 times before the Field Mice card finally showed up. But it was also really rewarding, and the appreciation I have for this game and its creation got so much deeper. I'm really excited for whatever Daniel Mullins' next game, Panda Circus, is going to be. I have a new computer now, so maybe I can actually take part in the ARG. But yeah, anyways, thank you so much for watching. Special thanks to Moody and Katie Louie for supporting me on Patreon. My next video probably won't be till June. And then I have one planned for October too. Yeah, it's not gonna be a year filled to the brim with videos, but I'm excited about the ones I'm working on, and I want to give them the time to be good. Anyways, see you next time. Bye!